The Trump administration is turning up the heat on Prime Minister Mark Carney over his Davos speech.
Great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage. Financial infrastructure as coercion.
He spoke to Prime Minister Carney, who was very aggressively walking back some of the unfortunate remarks he made at Davos.
It seems that every day we're reminded that we live in an era of great power rivalry.
Washington was not shocked because it lost an argument. Washington was shocked because it lost control. What unfolded after Mark Carney's Davos speech was not a routine diplomatic disagreement or a harmless miscommunication between allies. It was a public exposure of how fragile narrative power becomes when intimidation fails. The Trump administration did not merely get a detail wrong. It constructed a version of events that never happened, pushed it into the media, and expected the world to accept it without resistance. When that story collapsed, the response was not humility, correction, or restraint. It was panic. And panic, when wrapped in authority, always reveals itself as aggression. The sequence began at Davos, where Mark Carney delivered a speech that landed far beyond Canada's borders. His message was calm but unmistakably firm. He spoke about trade sovereignty, economic resilience, and the dangers of coercive pressure in a fractured global economy. There were no threats, no slogans, no theatrics, and yet the reaction was powerful. World leaders listened. Markets paid attention. The room responded with a standing ovation, not because Carney was loud, but because he was clear. In a global climate increasingly fatigued by spectacle and confrontation, clarity had become disruptive. That disruption did not go unnoticed in Washington. Shortly after the speech, Trump reached out to Carney directly. Phone calls between leaders are not unusual. What mattered was not the call itself, but what came after. A senior U.S. official went on television and told a very specific story. According to this official, Trump had applied pressure and Carney had softened his stance. The implication was deliberate. Canada had blinked. Trump had won. The narrative fit neatly into the administration's long-standing image of dominance. When Trump calls, others adjust. The problem was simple and fatal to that story. It was false. Carney had not retreated. He had not softened his position. Canada's policy had not shifted by a single degree. Instead of quietly correcting the claim, the administration allowed it to circulate, assuming it would hold. But facts have a way of resurfacing, especially when the person at the center of the story refuses to play along. Carney did not confirm the White House's version. He did not echo their language. He restated, calmly and publicly, exactly what he had said at Davos. Canada's position remained unchanged. There was no ambiguity, no room for reinterpretation. The narrative Washington had pushed collapsed under its own weight. At that moment, the administration faced a crossroads. It could admit the error. It could clarify the misunderstanding. It could step back and preserve credibility. Instead, it escalated. The same official who had promoted the false claim returned to television, not to correct the record, but to attack Carney personally. His credentials were mocked. His career was questioned. His experience was framed as elitist, disconnected, and out of touch with ordinary people. This was not an argument about trade. It was character assassination deployed as a distraction. This response exposed something deeper than bruised egos. It revealed a governing instinct that treats truth as optional when dominance is at stake. Confident power corrects itself quietly. Insecure power lashes out publicly. The Trump administration's reaction made clear which category it fell into. The moment control of the narrative slipped, the objective shifted from accuracy to relevance. The goal was no longer to explain what happened, but to reassert authority by any means necessary. Throughout the escalation, Carney did something Washington did not anticipate. He refused to engage in the spectacle. He did not insult Trump. He did not retaliate. He did not frame himself as a victim. He simply stated the facts, reiterated Canada's strategy, and moved forward. That restraint was not weakness. It was strategy. By refusing to personalize the conflict, Carney denied the administration the confrontation it needed to redirect attention away from the lie. Observers familiar with Trump's political style recognized the pattern immediately. Trump's influence has always depended on narrative dominance. He thrives when others react to him, adjust to him, and validate his relevance by engaging on his terms. Submission reinforces his authority. Resistance destabilizes it. In this case, resistance came not through confrontation, but through refusal. Carney did not flinch. He did not rush to reassure Washington. He did not acknowledge the White House's version of events. He let silence and consistency do the work. That refusal triggered escalation. When the administration realized it could not force compliance, it attempted to force attention. The rhetoric grew sharper, the language more personal. The objective shifted from defending policy to asserting dominance after public embarrassment. In doing so, the administration revealed its vulnerability. Power that depends on intimidation cannot tolerate indifference, and indifference is exactly what it received. The broader implications of this episode extend far beyond a single phone call or speech. Carney's Davos address resonated because it spoke to a growing fatigue among global leaders. Many are increasingly wary of coercion disguised as leadership and spectacle masquerading as strength. The standing ovation was not just applause for a speech, it was a signal that influence is changing shape. Authority grounded in credibility is beginning to outperform authority grounded in volume. Trump's political style relies on spectacle. It relies on dominating headlines, controlling language, and forcing others into reactive positions. When that system functions, it appears overwhelming. When it fails, it collapses quickly. This moment represented such a failure. The administration's inability to control the narrative, followed by its decision to attack rather than correct, undermined the very image of strength it was trying to project. This was not merely a political misstep, it was a strategic failure. It demonstrated that intimidation loses effectiveness when confronted with calm consistency. It showed that narrative power cannot be sustained through repetition alone. Once credibility cracks, every subsequent assertion becomes suspect. The administration's response turned a manageable error into a global embarrassment. What made the contrast so striking was not just Carney's composure, but the clarity of the divide. On one side stood a government scrambling to reclaim narrative control through aggression. On the other stood a leader who understood that leadership does not require domination to be effective. Carney's restraint reframed the entire episode. The more Washington attacked, the more it confirmed that it had lost the argument. This episode also revealed a fundamental truth about modern power politics. When control is lost, the instinct is rarely to adapt or acknowledge reality. The instinct is to distract, personalize, and escalate. That instinct is rooted in fear, not strength. It is the behavior of institutions that sense erosion but lack the tools to reverse it. Carney's response offered an alternative model. Leadership grounded in consistency does not require theatrics. Influence built on credibility does not need enforcement. By refusing to engage in the spectacle, Carney shifted the balance of power without raising his voice. The facts did the work. The administration's reaction did the rest. The consequences of this moment will not disappear quietly. Once a narrative of dominance fractures, it does not repair easily. Allies notice, markets notice, rivals notice. The world pays attention to who holds steady under pressure and who collapses into aggression. This exchange sent a clear signal. When confronted with resistance, Trump's administration chose intimidation over integrity. That choice will echo. In the end, this was a test of influence, a test of control, a test of narrative authority. Mark Carney passed by refusing to move. The Trump administration failed by revealing how desperately it needed others to move for it. Leadership is not about forcing compliance. It is about standing firm when pressure is applied. In this confrontation, the outcome was unmistakable. Canada held the line. Washington lost the narrative. And once narrative power is gone, everything else becomes noise.